I'm your host, Michael Messerly, and this is Scary, but True. My trip to the slaughter yard, a story my mom wouldn't tell me until my 30s. So let me start out by saying I enjoy writing, so this will be long. It is nonfiction, but will hopefully be an interesting read. I also admit that I have absolutely no memory of this experience. I was a little over 2 years old and just starting to walk on my own when this event took place. My mom only told me the story around 3 years ago when I was 32 and about to get married. My mother was raised in a very tiny fundamentalist Christian community and had no belief in the paranormal. She believed that our souls sleep until Judgment Day or something like this, ergo, there are no ghosts or spirits to haunt houses. Even over 30 years later, she still sounded terrified as she told me this. This woman, who always talks way too loud, was literally whispering by the end of it, and she was as white as a sheet. I believed her completely and still do. My mom never talks about stuff like this. I'm just glad I can't remember it too. In 1988, my parents had their second child. This was my brother, Victor, which is an alias. We were very crowded in our rented flat with 2 babies. My parents decided to move to a rambling old 2-story farmhouse on a 7-acre plot in southern Ohio for more room for the family. It was way out in the sticks and took almost an hour to get to town from there. My mom said the first time I saw the house, I freaked out. I was crying and saying things like, "Don't like mean house, ugly house, don't like scary house, mama, I don't like." My mom says this behavior was very out of character for me, but I stopped complaining about the house after a few weeks, so she chalked it up to the stress of the move. Now, this house was ramshackle AF and in the middle of nowhere. The kitchen was to the far rear of the house, and until recently, before we moved in, still had a working ancient wood-burning cooking stove against the back wall. This had caught the back wall on fire a couple of months before we moved in and caused a lot of damage. A lot of this damage wasn't fixed, so my young, broke parents got a very cheap rent agreement. Gotta love the 80s. On the second floor, directly above the kitchen, was a locked room. The landlord claimed it had heavy fire damage, but her son, who had done the repairs, claimed the only fire damage left was in the kitchen since it had been the worst and was beyond his skill to fix. Either way, the landlord was adamant that the room was off limits, and my parents always respected that. I know all this because I heard stories about the creepy farmhouse with the creepy door my whole entire life, and there were pictures of us in and around the farmhouse. The locked door was right next to the upstairs landing, so there was no avoiding it, and both my parents have told me it gave them the creeps. A few months after we moved in, my mother and I were in the yard with our pit Doberman mix named Boss. She was hanging laundry and I was rolling around with the dog. She said that just as she noticed that everything was way too silent, Boss started going apeshit from surprisingly far away. About 500 yards from the house on the left, there was a small duck pond. Boss was running towards my mom, then turning and running back towards the pond, barking frantically the whole time. My mom saw something thrashing around in the middle of the pond. She took off towards the water at full speed. Boss beat her there and drug me out of the water himself. Although my mom was confused how I got so far so fast and how I got into the center of the pond since it was over my head and I couldn't swim, she figured she underestimated me and brought in the baby gates and playpens. I was to be contained from now on. A few weeks later, she was cooking downstairs. Boss was outside, Victor asleep in his crib, and I was in my playpen in my room upstairs. I also had a gate on my door and one at the top of the stairs. The stairs ran up from the side of the kitchen, so my mom said she could listen for us crying or fussing while cooking. My mom said no longer than 15 minutes after the last time she looked in on us kids, Boss starts going crazy again in the yard. She runs up to check on us. Victor's still sleeping. Every baby gate is still shut and locked, but I am not in my room. A frenzied search reveals I'm not in the house at all. A sudden image of Boss saving me from drowning causes my mom to rush outside to see what he's trying to tell her this time. She said he was running in circles in the yard, barking uncontrollably. When she got outside, he took off towards the right, away from the pond. He would run ahead, turn around and bark at my mother, wait for her to catch up a little before racing off again. He ended up leading her almost 1.5 miles out onto the dirt road that separated our property from our neighbors. He led her to a thick stand of trees on our neighbor's side of the rocky drive. She said what hit her first was the foul stench of advanced decay. She plowed into the trees with her heart in her throat and her stomach full of ice. She noticed many piles of corrugated tin, tarps, tires, and other debris. Peeking under a sheet of tin, she discovered the extremely decomposed corpse of a butchered crow. As she headed deeper into the thicket where the tree cover was denser, she said less care was taken to cover the remains. Grisly pieces of bone and rotted chunks of bovine littered the area. Apparently, our neighbor, in an effort to cheat his taxes, had been illegally slaughtering cattle and hiding the remains in at least one of the few thick stands of trees around. She found me in the dead center of this thicket, just standing there, looking around like I was confused, surrounded by carnage. She said I didn't seem scared or anything, just standing. She rushed over to me and, after ascertaining that I wasn't injured, began questioning me on why I was here, how I got here. Keep in mind that although my mother said I started speaking very young, I still didn't have very much of a vocabulary. She said I told her, with that serious look only small children can give, that the children brought me here. Shatting her pants at the thought that anyone, even children, could walk right past her through the kitchen, get me from upstairs, and walk right back past her on the way down the stairs and out with me, she demanded to know what children and where the hell are they now. I looked at her, dead serious, and told her, the ones that live with us in the room at the top of the stairs, and I didn't see them anymore. After a moment of stunned silence, she started asking all kinds of questions about these children. However, she told me that I refused to say anything else. She said as long as she questioned me about what had happened, I would just stand there staring at her with a very serious expression and my mouth closed. She said this same pattern held true every other time she brought it up to me, so she was always left wondering and immediately began hounding my dad about moving closer to town. While the incident with me getting to the pond was highly unlikely, it was at least remotely possible. My mother is adamant that me being in the hidden slaughter yard that day was flat impossible. She says there is no way I could have even known I was out there, much less have the ability to open and relock the baby gates, get downstairs, past her, and end up almost 2 miles down the road in this place in under 15 minutes. I was only 2 and as slow and clumsy as most toddlers. As I said, she's still shaken by it after 30 years. Personally, I have no idea what happened that day. I've thought about hypnosis, but haven't yet decided I really want to remember. Maybe it's better to let it be a mystery, because whatever the fuck those things were, I really don't think they were children. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Scary But True so far. Please remember to follow, like, and rate this episode wherever you're listening to it, as it really helps me out. Now back to the episode. This story is one of my personal favorites. It is called, What Was She Planning to Do to Me? One time, I went to a bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I haven't been to much bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said her name was Candace, and I noticed she had really, really bright red hair. I assumed she dyed it. It was pretty, but unnatural. This girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already very drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was drunk already too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was just trying to get free drinks, so I told her we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend went to the bathroom. Before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers. He was too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it he could barely answer her. I told her that he was too drunk and I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea what happened. Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him, but I told her no because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than him and he was my friend, so he was my responsibility. I told her the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed she thought that I was jealous or cock-blocking, but my friend could barely stand and lost interest in Candace already at that point. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home and said we could go to her place alone. At this point, I had a few drinks and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way to her car. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held onto my arm. "Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. I felt so uneasy. We got in her car and drove down the street. "Do you want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it, so don't worry about paying," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look stupid when I'm drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace. I told her I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I said to get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. She went in the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth instead of a pint. On the car ride, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips, but she just kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice and pretend to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor in the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know I was acting drunker than I actually was, and she believed I was sloppy drunk when I was simply just buzzed. I took a couple more sips of liquor and finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her, but she didn't react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she lied to me about her name initially. We drove up to her house. I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked. We walked into her house. She closed her front door and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but assumed she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the bathroom. I walked into her bathroom, locked the door, and looked into the mirror. I just felt strange. I felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise and made myself puke up the liquor I drank. I flushed and went into the sink and started drinking the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I wanted to pretend to be drunk. I turned the sink off and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who was she talking to? And do what? I was out of the bathroom and into the living room. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head, that strange, very bright red hair go into another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me. "Let's go in my room," she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with the same hair. That is when I realized it was another girl with the same wig on. It was a wig the whole time. She had changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea it was a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her I just needed to use the bathroom one more time, and told her sorry I was so drunk. She said, "It's fine, just hurry up in there." I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whisper something to someone again. This time I think I heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on, and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it, ran faster than I ever have in my life. I didn't look behind myself or anything. I just ran from one backyard into another, hit a road and just kept running. I eventually came upon a 24-hour convenience store. I ran inside and stood right in front of the camera so I could be seen. I called a taxi and went home. What was she or they planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And mostly, why did she wear a wig that she gave to another girl to wear? Who was she talking to? What did it mean? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? The next day, I went back to the house with a couple friends just to see what was going on. Nobody was there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it only for that night and never came back. The White Witch. In the early 80s, I lived in Okinawa, Japan. My dad thought that seeing the world would be an adventure that would help my brother and I become better men, and I have to say, I think he was right. Being in the military showed me cultures many would never get to experience, and I am thankful for every experience that life gave to me, even the scary ones. While we lived in Japan, my father wanted us to have a fully immersive experience, so he chose to move us into a small Japanese neighborhood off of base. We lived in a little house at the top of an enormous hill in a cul-de-sac that overlooked, I kid you not, part of a huge zoo, and on one side a fairly large cemetery. Our particular house was set far above the monkey habitats, about a mile downhill. Between us and those habitats was nothing but thick Indiana Jones-style jungle. Jungle the neighborhood kids and I would tromp through endlessly, ignoring the local warnings about poisonous snakes and ancient untripped mines from World War II. We were the only American family living in that cul-de-sac, completely surrounded by Japanese families, and it was amazing. The kids loved us, and although we couldn't communicate through language very well, we understood each other perfectly, well, most of the time. Opposite us was an older couple with a lush garden surrounding their property. The older woman wanted us to call her Mama-san, and she had us helping her garden whenever she could coax us over with green tea and chocolate or banana cookies. We loved her. She was so welcoming and generous, as was everyone else actually. We lived in a wonderful neighborhood. The only drawback to Mama-san's home, however, was that she directly overlooked the cemetery, and that cemetery was unlike any cemetery I'd ever seen before. Since Okinawa is an island, burials don't happen very often. Instead, above-ground crypts are built. Many of them built into the side of hills that make up the island. The crypts are large, made of huge arcs of polished stone set over a large square of that stone, which has a square insert cut into the middle of it for the coffin to be placed inside. Once inside, the square is inset with another piece of polished stone just inside, leaving a kind of shelf on the outside so offerings could be made to lost loved ones. Yen, food, flowers, incense are some of the offerings given. Below Mama-san's house was a valley that swooped back up into another hill opposite her home. That valley and both hills were covered with these crypts, and spider webbing up and down through the crypts were various stone step pathways that were old and badly maintained. It was quite a sight. One evening, Mama-san asked me to come visit with her alone. She had something to show me, but it was only for me as the older brother. Intrigued and a bit proud, I agreed. She took me to the back of her garden and sat me on a thick wooden bench that was carved with scenes of fishermen and men with swords and told me she had a story to tell. Mama-san then disappeared for a few minutes and soon returned with a tray that held hot green tea and sweet rice cakes. Sitting next to me, she smiled and commented on the colors of the evening sky as the sun began to lower. Mama-san said she had seen me, my brother, and some other kids daring each other to follow a stairway path down into the cemetery. You have to understand, the path from our little home area down to the cemetery consisted of hundreds of steps, many broken or cracking, in and out of bushes and a steep incline. It would be dangerous for anyone, but the real test was seeing how long we could take walking through the crypts at night. Mama-san wanted to explain why that was a bad idea. Many years ago, during the war, Americans were thought to be devils, monsters that would murder innocent citizens for no reason other than to kill. That fear was the product of wartime propaganda used to encourage young men to military service and farmers to fight alongside them, but many didn't. Many ran. And with nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, hundreds of Japanese citizens hurled themselves off of a cliffside rather than face torture at the hands of their perceived enemy. I was terrified at hearing this. I had no idea this had happened. I was mortified and hit with such sadness I started to cry. The sun was setting, and the sky went from pink to blue to a deep orange and red. Mama-san reached out and held my hand, telling me not to worry. This was in the past, and the past is something we must always remember so we never go back. She went on with her story. One young woman had followed through with this sacrifice with her 2 children, but she survived the fall. She was in a coma for 2 months. When she did regain consciousness, she was horrified to realize she was not with her children. They had been buried somewhere in that cemetery below, in an unmarked crypt that held many others. The woman would spend days and nights searching the cemetery, crying in pain, the torment of her loss unbearable, until the day she threw herself into the ocean to hopefully be reunited with her lost family. But they say she never found her children. Her act of suicide doomed her to purgatory. She would remain tortured for eternity. The sun had disappeared, the cemetery drowned in an inky blackness, the main path dotted with dim, broken lights, feebly illuminating small areas. Mama-san continued. She still wanders the cemetery, she said, looking for her kids. You can hear her crying. And then she pointed down. I didn't want to, but I did. I looked. In the back of the cemetery, in the darkness, there was a white figure. At first, a bright white shimmer, moving slowly, kind of shaking. It moved from side to side, like it was moving among the crypts, and you could actually hear the crying. Softly at first, but then low moans and whimpers of pain as it got closer. I was terrified. I wanted to run, but Mama-san held my hand and whispered that she wouldn't come up here. We were too far, but that is why we shouldn't go down there after dark. She said many don't know her story and call her the White Witch, which angers her. It's best to stay away. It's best to pray for her. Mama-san said she comes out to see her often, hoping one day she will find her salvation. Needless to say, I never went down to that cemetery, not once, and I never sat back there with Mama-san again either. That was enough for me. I did, however, visit Suicide Hill. It's called Peace Prayer Park now, out of respect. I cried the whole time we were there. I prayed for all the souls and forgiveness. So many Japanese citizens spoke to us, welcoming us, telling us stories and sharing with us. I didn't feel worthy, and my love for the country and its people was overwhelming. I'll never forget my time there. I'd like to go back, to see if she's still there, wandering the graves, looking for her children. Skinwalker sighting, a true horror story from the Southwest. I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, aliens, monsters, they were all just stories to me. But after what I experienced in the Southwest, my perspective on the unknown has been forever altered. I was on a road trip with my best friend Jake. We had decided to take a detour through the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, mainly because of the scenic beauty and the rich history of the area. We had heard tales of skinwalkers, but we laughed them off. Our first day on the reservation was uneventful. We visited a few local spots, interacted with some of the locals, and set up camp near a canyon. As night fell, we sat around our campfire, sharing stories and enjoying the serenity of the desert. Around midnight, Jake decided to turn in. I stayed up, mesmerized by the stars. The Milky Way stretched across the sky, and I felt a profound sense of peace. That is, until I heard it. A low, guttural growl echoed through the canyon. I froze, thinking it might be a coyote or mountain lion. But then I heard a voice. It was distorted, as if someone was speaking through a broken radio, but it was unmistakably Jake's voice. "Come here," it beckoned. Confused, I turned to our tent. Jake was sound asleep. The voice called out again, this time from the opposite direction. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it towards the source. What I saw will haunt me forever. Standing on a ridge was a figure. It looked like a man, but its limbs were elongated and its eyes glowed a sickly yellow. It wore tattered clothing and its skin was a mottled gray. The most disturbing part was its face. It was Jake's face. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The creature mimicked Jake's voice again. "Come here." It took a step towards me, its movements jerky and unnatural. I bolted to the tent, shaking Jake awake. "We need to go now," I hissed. He looked at me, confused, but the urgency in my voice spurred him into action. We packed up as quickly as we could, the creature's voice echoing around us, mimicking our voices, our laughter, our conversations from earlier. As we sped away in our car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The creature stood in the middle of the road, watching us, its yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town. We checked into a motel, and I spent the night researching skinwalkers. The legend said they were witches who could take the form of animals or people, using their voices to lure victims. I don't know what we encountered that night, but I do know one thing. The stories are real. The Southwest is beautiful, but it holds secrets that are beyond comprehension, and I'll never set foot on the Navajo reservation again. To all of you reading this, please, be careful when you venture into unknown territories. Some legends are rooted in truth, and some nightmares are very, very real. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like, review, or a comment. As always, the original stories are linked down in the description below, and I claim no credit for the stories themselves. Be sure to follow the show everywhere at Scary But True Pod. And if you have your own scary story that you'd like me to share, email it to me at scarybutTruePod@gmail.com. My name is Michael Messerly, and I'll see you next time with more scary but true.